Uh, Talking about maintenance, winterization of the sprayer. We've got an R4030 here. We've got some different inspection sheets here, and there's a winterization checklist that we've got printed out here as well. So maintenance is there's a lot of different things that comes to maintenance and winterization. So if there's questions along the way, make sure to ask them, because some guys may be at different levels of what they know, and that's fine. So we can help you out, or if something we don't know, we'll look it up and we'll get you that information as quickly as we can. So as we look to winterize a sprayer, a couple different options. A lot of guys use fertilizer, and that does winterize, but it's also kind of hard on some things. It can cause that sitting in that pump there for the winter. It's kind of hard on that, and flow meters. I've got a flow meter sitting over there on the table, but those are expensive items. So something to consider. Maybe be better to use something else. We sell a winterizer fluid up in parts that you can mix. It's 50-50 with water, so that's a good option to keep that clean, and it's not near as corrosive as fertilizer. So that's probably the better way to deal with that. As we winterize, we want to make sure everything gets winterized. So you got to start out with enough fluid in the machine to where the pump's going to run. With some machines, let's say you have a 30 series, they're pretty good about draining out. You could open the rinse tank and they would pretty well just drain. That's not the case here. With an R series sprayer, you need some winterizer in that rinse tank because it holds a little bit of water. If you look at the plumbing on the bottom of the rinse tank, where it sucks out of the bottom of the rinse tank, it comes out of the bottom. But if you look where the valve goes into the rinse tank, it comes into the side a little bit. So if you're just opening the valve,
it's about 6 inches off the bottom actually. So you've got that much, and that's enough to set in that other line where it sucks from, and it will freeze and break.
So we need to make sure that we're taking care of that. But like I say, the 30 series were pretty good. You could open the valve, and they'd mainly drain away. I always, be on the safe side, I always poured a little bit in anyway. But they would pretty well take care of themselves on that. So, but on a deal like this, we'd recommend that you put some winterizer in there, and then be a good place to start. Suck that out of there with the pump then, and then so you can use that winterizer throughout the rest of the machine. So that's one place to start. And also the adductor is a good place, so you don't have to cart all that stuff up there, just some of it up there, and then dump some of it through or quite a bit of it through your adductor to suck it up into the machine that way. So you're going to want to run all your agitation, anything like that, tank clean outs, all that stuff we need to run to circulate that winterizer fluid throughout the machine, everywhere that there's water. Of course, remember the hand rinse tank. Then of course you're going to want to end up spraying all of this out of the boom. There's some nice ways to do it on these R series sprayers. They have a nozzle test function that you can do to this display, and then you can actually walk behind the machine and you can see that fluid as it comes out, and you can see if it's actually winterizer fluid or if you're still just pushing water. These R series, they have a boom air purge as well. So that's kind of a nice feature, and that's part of the reason they come up with these the end cap aspirators, and now the end caps with the plugs on them. It's part of the reason, whereas we're purging that boom with air. So we're introducing air to clean out the boom, which is a good idea, but then we put air in the boom, so we need to get that air out. So if you got an older sprayer, a 30 series, that can actually be added to your sprayer, and we can do that for you. But to take that air out, because that is an important thing, because that air compresses and then sits there and dribbles for a long time. It can last quite a few seconds. So that's something to be aware of. I'd already dealt with that quite a bit, but so
On winterizing, good deal to do is to rinse and clean it first. Do a tank clean first. Clean your strainers, because you don't want any of that sitting in that strainer all winter long, because most of it sets up.
we've had some machines that weren't cleaned real good, and we had one machine, for example, that we had a scum on the inside of the tank, and we couldn't get it clean. We tried power washing down in there, it wouldn't come off. Finally ended up down in the tank with a wire brush on a grinder, and that's the only thing that took it off. And that's probably not the best thing to be doing. Probably not just real good for your health, but it's what we had to do. So if we can avoid that in any way, that's going to be a lot better. So things to keep clean. We want to keep these things clean instead of letting them set up and sit too long. There's something I wanted to mention. This year has been especially muddy, and hydros have really had to work this year. They've worked extra hard, and sprayers, combines, a lot of these machines are really doing overtime, working overtime to get through this mud. So probably a good idea to really look at your oil and filters, that kind of stuff on the maintenance. On a 4830, they recommend 500 hours on the hydraulic oil. On the R series sprayers, they're saying 1,000 hours. Look at that to see where you're at, and oil's a whole lot cheaper than a hydro. Those hydros get pretty high dollar. So if we can do some maintenance ahead of time, probably be a good idea, especially where we've worked them so hard this last year. I don't know how many guys are aware on the air dryer. I guess we could start working our way around. We're not moving here too much. We could point things out as we go here a little bit. I guess I would assume guys are pretty well familiar with the system we have here. We have an inductor. This is a different setup. There's two different setups. Some of them are a little more automated on the valving to control the sprayer. So, and it could have, there's a different display here for the automated one. So there's an extra row of buttons here, and you can do a lot of different things with those features. But here we have a flow meter on this machine. They recommend cleaning these daily with brake clean. I don't know how many guys clean them daily, but it is something they recommend, and only with brake clean. Don't use carb clean. Something that's going to leave no residue, and it's not harsh. Carb clean's a pretty harsh chemical, so we don't want to do something like that. There's a high flow valve here, or orifice valve. Excuse me, not a high flow, but an orifice valve. So that's going to change where you're at with your rates. That can, if you have that open and you're doing a lower rate, it's going to have a lot of fluctuating going on your rate. It's going to mess that up. If you do have a high flow system, there will be a high flow valve, and there'll be an extra flow meter. If you're using the high flow system, then you have to activate that flow meter in the display. So there's a place you got to go in there and check mark that to let the machine know to watch that flow meter, because they're both running there together. It's only going to read one of them if you got the other one unchecked. So it's going to be showing you half rate. So that's something to be aware of. As we look at these hoses, sometimes we see where that chemical is kind of hard on them, and you'll see sometimes where they're kind of seeping through, develop leaks, and they'll get real sticky a lot of times. So something to look for. on maintenance type stuff. Hub oils, most of them are recommended about 500 hours, but the 4830s, the rear hubs, that's something that we need to mention. They recommend 250 hours, and there's a DTAC solution talking about the rear hubs as well. They've dropped the oil level just a little bit on them. What they do is they line it up just like you would normally with the drain plug on the bottom. They make a mark 40 millimeters over, and they draw a new line, and that would be where you would line up for your fill port. You're still draining the same place, of course, but your fill port will be just a little bit lower that way. What's happening is it's creating too much pressure, which causes heat. So that's something to be aware of on that if you got a 4830.
And on your hub oils, when they set for a long period of time over the winter, they are going to seep a little. The seal will. It is fine for a little seepage within the first 100 hours because it's just a metal on metal seal.
It's a two O-rings and metal against metal. So then as it starts to turn, it'll get a film of oil, and that's how that seals that. It's kind of a different type of deal.
Yeah.
But there's DTAC solutions that talk about that too.
So if you have just a little bit of dirt buildup after you started back up, it's fine. It's normal. Now, if you're coating the whole inside of the wheel, then there's a problem.
Hub oils are something that guy needs to keep on top of them. We do recommend running the 8140 synthetic oil just to keep a little better lubrication, a little better on the heat. So something to be aware of. We in our businesses we run the through certain times where it's kind of a lull and other times when we're really busy. So stay ahead of that, I guess, on that. Anything else we need to mention right here?
Don't see anything on this side.
Start working our way around here, I guess, a little more. If you got a 47 or a 30 series sprayer, you'd have scissors in this area. That's something a guy needs to keep on top of too. Making sure to grease those pretty often. I'd say daily. I think I read somewhere the book said 50 hours. I think daily. It's kind of a high wear item, and if they get loose, your auto track will not be as accurate. So you'll see a lot of weaving through the field kind of thing once they get loose. So you want to keep on top of those, greasing those. These sprayers have a grease bank on them right here, so it makes it a lot nicer to grease these. But they recommended 5 pumps a day on each one of those. So something to be aware of. Boom on the 30 series, sometimes there's a bearing here in the middle where that whole thing pivots. We replaced some of those. We also see sometimes where the boom doesn't want to go in the cradle, whether that be on a flat fold boom or the older booms. There's some things we can do to help with that. There's some shims in the back. It could just be your bearings loose too. Some things we can do to help that on that. But these bushings here where your boom lifts, or pins here and bushings, those can get loose too. So something we can check for you. It's all part of, there's a lot that goes into one of these inspections with a sprayer. So if you bring one in, we're going to do that. We're going to look everything over. So we check anything, any inspection, we're checking anything we can check. So we want to know if everything is good. So you're going to hopefully go this next season without any issues at all. That's our goal. Anything I'm missing here?
Not here.
course, looking for hydraulic leaks. Sometimes a guy can have some leaks here and there. O-rings on the valve, something we've seen. If you have boom strainers, a guy needs to clean those. This does have a foamer on this machine. A lot of them are getting to where they don't have foamers anymore. So that'd be something you'd want to get winterized as well. We didn't talk about that, but you want to winterize that. They've made this one handier to grease. The boom is just a lot nicer to grease. There's some Zerks that go up to these different pins. It's easier.
Another thing on these sprayers, guys probably don't think about a lot, is air dryer. Recommended service to change the filter is annually. It's not a cheap filter either.
Right
but
there.
You get enough water and moisture buildup in an air system and you will have problems.
This machine has DEF on it. There's a DEF filter in that system right down here on the bottom of that header unit. That's something also that need to be aware of. I think they said 3 years or 4,500 hours. So
Yep.
My thought is you're probably going to hit 3 years for most operators around here before your 4,500 hours maybe. But any questions along the way here? Make sure to ask if you have any, because we can either get that information or tell you. Let us know whatever we can do to help you out. Okay. Well, let's keep working our way around here, I guess. Air filter's right back there on this one. Fuel systems we haven't done much on the fuel systems on these. They've been pretty trouble-free so far. But the 30 series, we've done a little more on the fuel systems there. So something to keep on top of your fuel filters. Sometimes you see a certain code, 134707, ECU code that we deal with. So if you see that, we've dealt with that quite a bit to know what we need to do there. But there's several parts involved with that. There's an electric fuel pump that sits on top of the fuel filters. It's a pretty big culprit. But if a guy keeps up on top of the filters, that's going to extend its life. So something to be aware of. I know that John Deere recommends running Fuel Protect too, to help protect their injectors. So something to consider putting in your fuel to try to keep them going a little longer. Anything else I'm forgetting?
I can't think of anything you're forgetting.
I'm sure we're forgetting something, but we don't know what it is at the moment. So if there's any questions, make sure to speak up. We've got a test stand set up over here to test nozzles. So if anybody's brought nozzles, more than glad to do that for you. We've also got some of the tools that Caraco is selling to help you in testing your own if you'd like to do it that way too. We've got an electronic tool that you can set your pressure at 40 pounds, and depending on what nozzle you have, let's say for example you have a red nozzle, we can set your pressure at 40, get that going, and stick that under there. If we're at 41 or 0.41 gallon per minute, then that's right at the line. So anything above that it's time to replace that nozzle. 10% is what they say. So, and if anybody brought nozzles, sure glad to check them. We got it ready to go. We've already checked a couple that are on there, so let us know.
About it.
About all I can think of to mention, I guess, unless anybody has any questions. Maintenance goes a long way on these. Maintenance goes a long way on any machine, though. So, whatever we can do to extend the life of that machine is going to help it out. Save you in the long run.
With how some of the chemicals are harmful nowadays, if we're out on one, on a sprayer, try to be honest with us with what's in it, because it's our health too. We're right in it usually, so.
Yeah, that helps to know ahead of time, you know.
So if we need to be
what we
more
got.
cautious, wear the protective clothing or whatever we need to.
We're out on time, but we're a little early. But we could go through and show you on this nozzle test stand how some of that works. I guess I had a flow meter sitting here too. This flow meter was bad. A flow meter should turn pretty easily. So if you give it a puff of air, it should spin easily. This one, if you blow on it pretty hard, it'll spin, but it comes to a stop pretty fast, which is not good. It should spin pretty easily, and like I say, clean them with brake cleaner. This comes with a tag on it, and that's a calibration number here on the bottom here, 566.8. So your sprayer, there'll be a place to enter that number in. So if you have to replace a flow meter along the way, then we would enter that number in for the calibration number into the display. That number is important. If that's not right, then it's going to be telling you you're putting down the wrong amount of gallons. So it's important. This is the test piece of equipment to test nozzles, and it's pretty simple to use. You can go in liters per minute, ounces per minute, or gallons per minute. The standard is gallons per minute on these nozzles. So if we turn on the machine and we dial this into 40 pounds, well, I'm off just barely. I turn that on and then stick it under. Get closer if you want to see it too. We can show you after the fact too, but as soon as it gets over that top one, you can see that one is at 0.36, which that's a red nozzle actually, but it was mainly black, but it's got a red tip. So it's under where it's supposed to be. But anything over 10% of what that nozzle is supposed to be needs to be replaced. Pretty quick way of checking your nozzles. Those nozzles are the most important part of what's going on with your sprayer. If they're not working right, then you're wasting your time. You're not going to get a good burn down, or whatever you're doing, you want them to be doing the right thing. You want to get good coverage. So something to check. I know we sell these up front if you're interested in one.
And you don't have to go through and check every nozzle on the sprayer. Just pick a handful. That'll give you a pretty good average. If you got 4 or 5 bad in a row, you might as well replace the whole set, because you're not going to find very many more that are good.
Yeah. Probably going to be certain areas where your nozzles are going to be worse than others. Your middle section is probably doing more spraying than your wings. Now maybe you hit something with the wings, and that might be a different story there. But your middle section is probably doing more spraying if you think about point rows and that kind of thing. So consider, if you're going to test 3 or 4 of them, test the right ones. This deal here is a nozzle cleaner. It's pretty simple. You just pull it out, push it back in till it snaps, and then you take a nozzle off. If you had one that was dirty or whatever, stick it up there, and it just puts out a puff of air to clean that out. If you're in a field type situation and just want to get to going. So that's an option there. I know a lot of guys have plumbed air lines and nozzles onto their air tanks, but it's another way to do it. Nice little tool.
Any questions on, well, any of it, I guess?
That's about all we have for you out here. So, like I say, any questions, come up and ask later, or if you have nozzles